flyers or liars. Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Business Blaze. I thought I would just mention it at the start that this t-shirt, the biggest comment that I got was, Simon, is this t-shirt available in green? The answer is yes, it absolutely is. Enjoy. Purchthemerch.co. Let's see what Danny's written for us today. If you're new here, what happens is Danny writes us a script. I shall read the script. It might be related to business. Sort of. I mean, yeah. And then Sam will add some memes. This one is famous pattern wars, the Wright brothers versus Curtis. As I've never heard of Curtis, I'm going to assume that the Wright brothers won this one because didn't they invent planes? I mean, I know, like, they were like first in flight and all of that. So, I mean, planes sort of existed. They did something that was with us something. Let's just see what Danny writes because he's smart. During the winter of 1886, a young scoundrel named Oliver Crook Hoare was, it's spelled H-A-U-G-H, but Oliver Crook Hoare. So your surname is Hoare and your middle name is Crook. That is unfortunate. Was about to violently change the course of the future with a big hockey stick. What is going on? Even Oliver Crook Hoare's name suggests that he was a bit dodgy, but like an ox. By the age of 15, he had built up a reputation as a neighborhood bully in Dayton, Ohio, and locals claimed that he was never without the wish to inflict pain or at least discomfort on others. When you see it, it's like the kid who's torturing cats. Let's keep a close eye on that one, shall we? But maybe it wasn't entirely his own fault. Suffering from mild tooth decay as a child, he'd been regularly provided with bumper supplies of cocaine tooth drops to help him keep the pain at bay. Oh, the good old days. I mean, I'm serious about that one. I mean, that sounds pretty awesome. And this may have been the catalyst for his teething problems with drug and alcohol addiction. Shocking. It's like, well, what did you do? Well, we gave the kid cocaine, and now he's got a drug problem. Might have had something to do with it. Well, I mean, it might not have. Definitely my buyer would be like, it wasn't us. Heroin, the less addictive version of morphine. Just a couple of blocks away from Oliver lived the Wright brothers, Wilbur, aged 18, and Orville, aged 15. It turns out that they invented a plane to fly away from the bully who wouldn't leave them alone. Great things are expected from Wilbur. He'd proven to be an outstanding student and a champion athlete at high school, and he was tipped to go to Yale University. But then, one day, no mention about Orville. It's like, Wilbur, we expect great things from you. You're an amazing child. What about Orville? Oh, Orville. But then, one day, in 1886, Oliver Crook Hoare came along and smashed him in the mouth with a hockey stick. It's not known whether this was an accident or a deliberate act of brutality. I'd put my $10 on the latter. Yeah, no, he sounds like this Crook guy sounds like a knob. But the effect on Wilbur Wright was devastating. Most of his teeth were knocked out, and there followed serious digestive problems, heart palpitations, and bouts of depression. I mean, okay, one, obviously this was him getting that was quite the whack. I mean, he got hit in the mouth with a hockey stick. I mean, I played hockey at school. People got hit in the mouth and the face with hockey sticks, and it's like, you might crack a tooth, you might lose a tooth. I think there was one kid who lost a tooth. It's not the end of the world. I mean, to get your entire set of teeth whacked out is pretty intense, but also, he sounds a bit like, oh no, I got whacked in the mouth and now I've got depression. Like, get the f over it, Wilbur. I'm not asking anyone to whack me in the mouth with a stick or anything, or saying that obviously you can't have post-traumatic stress disorder or anything like that. But I think if I got all my teeth knocked out because someone whacked me in the face with a hockey stick, I'll be like, well, that f***ing sucks. I mean, I've spent a long time in the dentist. But I don't think I'd get depression from it. I think there's something more going on here. Anyway, so he spent 7 years recovering, and then he couldn't go to Yale. But it's interesting to ponder how if Oliver had not smashed him in the face with a hockey stick on that fateful day, Wilbur Wright would probably have pursued a more traditional education and career, instead of turning his troubled mind to invention and teaming up with his brother to spearhead— oh god, this wire, I'm tripping over it again— to spearhead the aviation industry. As for Oliver Crook Hoare, he went on to be convicted of 16 murders. I told you we should keep an eye on him. Including his own parents and brother, and was sentenced to death by electrocution in 1907. Still, one big smack in the mouth for a man, one giant leap for mankind. Yet, although the Wright brothers were to be celebrated in some quarters as pioneering heroes, it could also be argued that they became so obsessed with fiercely protecting their inventions that they ended up running their own enterprise into the ground and crippling American aviation at a time when it was most desperately needed. Yeah, when I think of America, they never got planes working. It is absolutely wild. There's like, what, 1890s, 1903? When was that fateful flight? 19-something, 1903? I see here. That what? 66 years ago, there was a dude landing on the moon. Perhaps the writing was on the wings, when the Wright brothers chose to conduct their early experiments into solving the flying problem under very secretive conditions. I wish like the flying problem. It's like an impossible task. We'll just call it the something problem, like the faster than light problem. Let's just approach it that way. It's a problem to be solved. Obviously, that's a different level of challenge because, you know, one is impossible and one is not. Because, I mean, we can look at birds and be like, well, they could clearly do it. Whereas we don't look at other and be like, well, you know, the Starship Enterprise could clearly travel faster than the speed of light. Earlier experiments such as those conducted by Octave Chanute, maybe, I'm sorry, Octave, you have a weird name, in 1896 at Lake Michigan had prompted a flurry of media attention. But Wilbur and Orville's first experiments with manned gliders at the turn of the 20th century went largely under the radar. It could be argued that they were trying to avoid the distractions of a media circus, but they were also very keen to avoid the risk of giving away their secrets. Right from the very beginning, the Wright brothers seemed more focused on how much money they were going to earn from their hard work rather than any prestige attached to propelling mankind into the skies. Well, yeah, because you need money to live. You don't need prestige to live. It's like, how am I going to feed my family? Well, all of this prestige. It's like, no, you need money. No one should blame them. Money's also good. It's nice. It buys you things. It makes your life comfortable. Ask any person with money, do they like having money? They'll tell you yes. Ask any poor person, do they wish they had money? They'd tell you yes. It's not complicated. And so it was that on the 17th of December 1903, when the brothers made what many consider to be the world's first recorded, controlled, powered, and sustained heavier-than-air human flight in the motor-operated airplane the Wright Flyer, a crowd of just 5 people witnessed history in the making at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. At least one of those had probably just got a bit lost on his way to the hot dog stand. Again, bada-bum-bum. Someone the other day was like, does Simon think that he invented bada-bum-bum? And I'm like, I think I did invent it. I mean, I obviously didn't invent bada-bum, or however the bada-bum. I don't even know how a regular rimshot goes anymore, but obviously I didn't invent that. But can someone point me towards who originally came up with the extended rimshot? Because I assumed I must have copied it from somewhere. I have no idea where, and I'd like to know. If not, I'll proudly be the inventor of the double extended rimshot. Thank you very much, random internet commenter. Perhaps the secrecy worked against them in many ways, as not everyone believed them. The European press were quite hostile in their response to the Wright brothers' claims, particularly the French, who dubbed the brothers bluffeurs and ran headlines such as "Flyers or liars." It wasn't until public demonstrations of the other day I made a video and I said, like, there's some accents you could get away with doing and not sound racist, like German, Russian, all of these. I think French falls into that camp, rather than, you know, if you do an Asian accent, that just sounds racist. I think it is okay to do the French accent. It wasn't until, let me know in the comments below, French people, because all the German people at the last one were like, nah, it's cool, it's pretty funny. And I'm like, okay, cool, thank you. It wasn't until public demonstrations of the rebuilt airplane took place in 1908 on a horse racing track just outside of Le Mans in France that the doubters were made to eat their words. But that's quite a long time between the original flight and the first public demonstration, and that's partly because the Wright brothers wanted to make sure that they'd secured the patent before anyone else got the chance to take a good look at their airplane. And that even included the US military, obviously, and incredibly sensibly, because the US military is definitely not above stealing your ideas. The Wright brothers had offered to sign a manufacturing contract with the US War Department, but they were only willing to let the department have a look at what it might be buying after it had paid a massive deposit. The Wrights wouldn't even let the US War Department have a look at a photograph of the plane until the big bucks had been handed over. Having already wasted tens of thousands of dollars in previous years on crackpots who claimed to have invented the airplane, the department politely declined the offer. The Wrights had originally applied for a patent in 1903, they had overseen the whole procedure themselves, and the patent was swiftly rejected. Perhaps their drawings weren't quite cool enough. Yeah, I mean, all of this is like, getting a patent, it's so expensive. I don't have a patent, a friend of mine has a patent, and it's so complicated and so expensive. But after hiring the services of a specialty patent attorney, probably smart, in 1906, they were finally granted a US patent in 1906 for a flying machine. And I have to say, getting that patent has got to be one of the coolest things. Like, what's your patent for? Like, my friend's patent's for some like obscure engineering thing that he made. I don't even know what it does. I don't even remember what area it's related to be honest. Something to do with like machine design. 2160. A man patents a time machine. Next coolest thing. Before we look at the patent, it's worth, although he'd probably patent his time machine whenever the f he likes. Because he has a time machine. No one beat him to the patent office. Can you imagine if there were two people racing to invent a time machine? Whoever gets there first beat them by a long way, no matter how close it was. Before we look at the patent, it's worth looking at what the Wright brothers had actually invented. They had figured out that the key to conquering the flying problem was grounded in the importance of lateral stability to flight, or put it another way, wingtip to wingtip stability. The Wrights had got around this problem with the invention of something they called wing warping. They used a series of wire pulleys to twist or warp the wood and fabric wings of the airplane in opposite directions, so one side of the craft would automatically go up when the wingtips on the opposite side were pulled down. Oh my god, it's 100 and something years later, and I don't understand how planes work. I don't understand this. Oh god. The breakthrough in the study, and I have another channel that does, called Mega Projects, subscribe, that does loads of airplanes, and it's like, I mean, I've definitely been explained how wings work. I'm still like, I'm a bit confused. Isn't it magic? The breakthrough in the study of aeronautics meant that full control of an airplane could be achieved for the first time by harnessing the changes of the lateral margins of the wings. So unlike earlier attempts, which had seen airplanes capable of just generating lift, the invention of the Wright brothers meant that you could actually control the damn thing, make banked turns and climbs and dives, and ideally avoid crashing into a tree. That would be incredibly useful. But the granted patent was surprisingly open-ended. Although it included specific details of wing warping and the steerable rear vertical rudder and the wing design and the forward elevator and all other clever technical stuff that Simon definitely doesn't understand. I know what a rudder is. It also seemed to indicate that the wing warping was an optional approach and that other alternative methods could be used, which would also be covered by the patent. Really? If you're like, yeah, no, I invented a plane, how does it work? Well, it's got a propulsion device and I'm patenting that. The jet engine comes along and people are like, oh, fuck, we gotta pay those fucking Wright brothers again. Those cocks. How did they patent everything? It'd be like Lufthansa are putting in a new chair. Oh, the Wright brothers! They patented chairs on planes! What the Wright brothers actually granted was a patent on the concept of lateral control of an airplane. And bearing in mind that lateral control would go on to be an essential component of pretty much all future airplane designs, they had in their eyes been granted a patent on every single airplane that would be manufactured in the future. That is a pretty solid patent, I must say. And they felt that they were perfectly justified in seeking such a reward for their efforts. As Wilbur Wright put it, "It is our view that morally, the world owes its almost universal system of lateral control entirely to us. It is also our opinion that legally it owes it to us." Alright, I don't know if Danny feels like this is negative. The wording kind of feels negative, but I'm kind of like, well, they did invent it, didn't they? He does deserve to profit off his, like, genius invention. One of many men who had quite a different opinion on this was Glenn Curtis, the American— oh yeah, this is about someone versus someone. Oh my god, I should pay attention. So this Glenn Curtis dude, he's an American motorcycle pioneer who was born in the Finger Lakes region of New York, and his star sign was Gemini. Star signs, it means nothing. Smash that dislike. I'm a Taurus. Oh my god, you're a Taurus. I'm a Gemini. Glens, if you believe that stuff, you're dumb. You're just— there's no other— you're just a bit dumb.
What are you, fucking stupid?
Glenn's very first job was at a place called Eastman Dry Plate and Film Company. Oh, that went on to be Kodak, which would later become more famously known as the Eastman Kodak Company. Thanks, Danny. Oh, during his brief spell there, he invented a stencil machine which would become later adopted by the company. He also invented a primitive early camera. Glenn later turned his attention to motorcycles and spent a short period of 5 years. Is the short period of 5 years? 5 years is a lot. I've been doing YouTube 5 years. That's a long time. I feel like I've been doing this forever. It wears on me. Not really. It's awesome. I'm very grateful. Also, I get to stay inside during the Corona times. Oh, he's officially the fastest man in the world on a V8 powered bike that he knocked together himself in Ormond Beach, Florida. Alexander Graham Bell regarded Glenn as the greatest motor expert in the country, and he was happy to give Glenn a call on a telephonic device that Alexander didn't really invent but still managed to secure the patent on anyway, and offer him a position at the Aerial Experiment Association. I guess it's only fair we get this guy's background as well. Between 1908 and 1910, the AEA produced 4 increasingly impressive aircraft, including the Red Wing, the White Wing, and perhaps most famously of all, the June Bug. Yeah, that was what we call in the planes. Red Wing, White Wing. What should we call the next plane? June Bug, which was primarily designed by Glenn Curtis. The latter was the craft that really propelled Glenn into superstardom. Whereas the Wright brothers have been performing their early demonstrations in secret, the first flight of the June bug garnered huge media attention and became the first pre-announced public flight of a heavier-than-air flying machine in history. Glenn won the Scientific American trophy for his effort, but perhaps most annoyingly of all for the Wrights, he was issued with the US pilot's license #1 from the Aero Club of America. You can't have it all, Wrights. You can't have it all. Wilbur Wright actually received his license at the same time, but because the first batch of licenses was issued alphabetically, the poor lamb had to make do with number 5. Look, Wilbur Wright, I understand you. I've got sympathy for you here, because I'm also a W. You get everything f***ing last. I remember times when the teachers at school were like, well, today we're gonna do it would happen like once a year or whatever. It'd be like, today we're gonna start with the other ends of the alphabet. Simon. And I'd be like, great, I'm always last, bitch. What the f***? You think doing it once a year is enough to make up for this? Blah! I'm not really that upset about it, honestly. I probably didn't want to go first. That's what I tell myself at night. When I'm crying myself to sleep.
I don't care!
Now Glenn thought that he had been quite clever and avoided any risk of patent infringement, coming up with an entirely new system of conquering lateral control. Instead of borrowing the Wright's wing warping technique, Glenn decided to use ailerons instead. These are a system I've heard of those, so maybe that's actually what people use today. These are a system of separate movable flaps placed at the back of each wing. The basic principle is still used by today's manufacturers, and in fact, the history of ailerons goes back further than Glenn's first use of them. But we'll return to that pivotal thought a bit later. The point was that Glenn felt that his new system, which also included adding wheels on an aircraft for the very first time for less bumpy takeoffs and landings, had steered well clear of the Wright brothers' patents, and he didn't have to pay them a cent. I have to say, this does sound fair. It's like you achieved the same. It'd be like, yeah, you can't patent something and then have dominance over every way of doing that thing, right? I mean, this doesn't seem right. I'm now coming around to Glenn's side. Good guy Glenn. Wilbur and Orville Wright disagreed. They felt that the patent covered any form of three-dimensional lateral control, and so they filed a lawsuit for patent violation. It wasn't the only lawsuit they filed. In fact, they took the time to sue a long chain of competitors and aviators right around the globe. By this time, the Wright Company was a big entity with an esteemed board of directors. Sadly, though, it seems the company was now almost entirely devoted to patent protection, rather than, say, designing any new planes. Yeah, this is it. Like, I don't know, the more I do, and I don't want to complain, but it's like the bigger your business gets and all this stuff, I spend way more time like sending emails, managing shit, paying people, and I'm like, I like making videos. Oh yeah, it gets that way. I mean, I'm still a tiny ass business. I spend most of my time making videos, which is great, but you can see how this creeps up on you, and you're like, oh, why am I running a company? I don't want to do this. Glenn Curtis was openly scornful of how the Wright Company were filing lawsuits left, right, and center. His team once declared that if anybody dared to jump in the air and wave their arms around a bit, the Wrights would pounce on them with a lawsuit. Most smaller competitors would never have dreamed of taking on the Wrights in court, and they were happy to hand over the required fees to the Wright Company to avoid litigation. But some of them, these Wright brothers, like they're the OG patent trolls. But some of them were quite brave and took on the mighty new company, and the results were mixed. For example, a French court ruled in favor of the Wrights, while a very similar case in Germany saw the Wrights walk away in a defeat. But it was the Wright brothers and Curtis case that was destined to generate the most headlines and drag on for years. By now, Glenn was happily selling his own airplanes to aeronautic societies, while the Wright brothers stamped their feet in rage and screamed that he wasn't legally allowed to do this. As the case rolled through the courts for the next few years, the Wright Company found itself floundering in stagnation. There were reports of underpaid and poorly treated managers who never hung around for very long. But more importantly than that, their competitors had got their noses out in front by quite some way. In the absence of any innovation, the Wright Company's planes were now considered outdated and slightly embarrassing, while other companies were manufacturing superior craft. Honestly, the Wright brothers seem to have actually got onto something pretty smart here, because they're like, yeah, we'll just patent it and then take the work from everyone else. Just let's abuse the patent system and do that rather than create anything. I mean, it's kind of shitty, but it is pretty smart. So why would we make a new plane? We just take money from all of you guys making new planes. I'm gonna go chill out in Hawaii or whatever. Glenn Curtis' own new company had now slipped into first position to become the biggest manufacturer of aircraft in the United States, while Wilbur and Orville just kept turning up to work to discuss the latest developments in their lawsuits. Wilbur Wright never lived to see the outcome of the lawsuit against Glenn Curtis. In April 1912, he was taken ill with typhoid fever during a trip to Boston and died shortly thereafter, leaving his younger brother Orville to continue the flight alone. I thought one of them died in a plane crash, so I guess it's Orville, but I might just be wrong on that altogether. The family accused Glenn Curtis of being directly responsible for Wilbur's death. What the f***, Wright family? It's like, You just... No! As Glenn's refusal to back down led to the loss of Wilbur's health over worries and stresses about his patent battle. You started it, Wilbur, you dick. Allegedly. It was a battle that the Wrights were destined to win, though, in 1913. Yeah, he didn't really win, though, did he? Because he died. Oh, sucks to be you. My opinion on them has changed. In 1913, the US court sided with the Wright Company and ordered Glenn to stop manufacturing airplanes with ailerons. The case was dragged out for another year when Glenn appealed the decision, but the verdict was ultimately upheld in 1914. The Wrights had technically won the patent war, but it would turn out to be something of a hollow victory. Following the verdict, Orville Wright now had the perfect opportunity to effectively close down his major competitors and build up a new monopoly on an industry with his own increasingly inferior crafts. But he couldn't really be asked. Yeah, he's got fat and lazy from all that patent money. He's probably eaten too many whatever people eat in Hawaii. What's that weird thing in a bowl? I had one. It's called like a poke bowl? A pokey? A pocky? I got one the other day. It wasn't that. It wasn't all that, to be honest. And don't be like, oh, Simon, you need to just try it from this one place. It's incredible. I'm like, well, I got it from a place that had great reviews, and I just don't think it's for me. It was a bit weird. Maybe the patent fight had completely drained him of any motivation to continue, or maybe he just felt satisfied enough by victory over Glenn Curtis that he felt that his work was done, or he's fat and rich. Either way, he sold his company to a group of investors for a reported $1.5 million and walked away into relative obscurity, probably wishing that he'd just invented something like thermonuclear weapons for a simpler life. Ba-da-boom-boom. I'm gonna patent that shit now I know how. At this point, things get a little messy. Orville's former company, it's like, yeah, like those guys who tried to patent reaction videos. It's like, guys, it makes you look like dicks. Meanwhile, Glenn Curtis was now building up his own large collection of aircraft patents. Between them, oh, I missed a line. Danny had a go at me for missing lines the other day. He was like, Simon, sometimes you just skip lines. And I'm like, yeah, because I mean, I lose my place because I'm not very smart. And he's like, Simon, sometimes the videos don't make sense when you skip lines. I'm like, oh God. I'm sorry, Danny, I'll try harder. Look, I'll go back. I'll go back for you. At this point, things get a little messy. Orville's former company briefly merged with Glenn's company, although the original union was short-lived. Wow, that was kind of important. I probably shouldn't have skipped that. Meanwhile, Glenn Curtis was now building up his own large collection of aircraft patents. Oh no, Glenn, you've gone to the dark side. Why? Between them, the Wright Company and the Curtis Company had more or less blocked the building of new air. Well, I know why, because he saw how f***ing successful it was, didn't he? This isn't their fault. This seems to be the patent system's fault. They'd blocked the building of new airplanes from competitors and had stifled the development of American aviation, as they owned the patents to just about every potential component and would actively sue anyone else who dared to infringe on a patent. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can see that nasty mark on my hands. I burned myself. I was building a fire, and I was taking my hand out, putting a thing in, and I accidentally brushed my hand against the chimney. Turns out, it's outrageously hot, and now I have quite a nasty burn on my hands. Looks a little bit infected, but I don't think I need to see a doctor just yet, because I might get COVID. Also, they're busy with COVID. And this proved to be a massive problem in 1917 when the US finally decided that it was about time they got involved in the First World War, but realized that they didn't own a single aircraft suitable for military service because all the main manufacturers had been too busy fighting each other instead of designing anything useful. Guys, come on! The US initially had to make do with French aircraft until a solution could be found on home soil to put an end to their patent stalemate, which had crippled the industry. A young politician by the name, you might have heard of him, Franklin Roosevelt, then serving as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, came up with a solution. He convinced the intellectual property holders to form a new patent pool, which every manufacturer would be legally required to join. It's like, yeah, convince them to do it by making it the law. It's like, yeah, Simon, we're convincing you not to murder people. How? Oh, well, it's the law, and if you murder anyone, you'll go to prison forever. So, okay. Follow me convinced. This meant that new manufacturers would be allowed to make use of all the patent technology in return for a very modest blanket fee. And for their part, the Wright Company and the Curtis Company would each receive $2 million to help soften the blow of not being able to financially screw anyone over anymore. And this was $2 million in like 1917. That is a lot of money today. Like, a lot. This proved to be the real closure of the long-running patent battle. Although the new pool was originally meant to last only for the duration of the war, it actually continued way beyond the war until the patents finally expired. Now that the Wright brothers were no longer actively involved, it just seems as if nobody else could be bothered opening up a fresh can of worms. The two opposing parties did eventually come together for a more successful union in 1929 when the Curtis Wright Company was formed. Orville Wright had long disappeared from the scene by this point, and he died in 1948, and I'm guessing because Danny doesn't mention it. He didn't die in a plane accident, and it must have been some other aviation pioneer, maybe someone. I feel like I definitely made a video about this at some point, so hit me up in the comments below and tell me I'm dumb. The curious thing about this case goes back to those ailerons that Glenn Curtiss used for his early airplanes as an alternative to wing warping. It turns out that Glenn didn't exactly invent ailerons, he'd more kind of reinvented them, as they'd actually been invented by a British guy in 1868, but had never even put to good use and had become largely forgotten. If anybody had remembered this earlier invention of ailerons, it's suspected that the Wright brothers had indeed remembered them but chosen not to remind anyone else. Smart move, Wright brothers. Then it's very possible that the Wrights would never have been granted a patent for lateral control in the first place, or they would have lost the patent battle if it had ever been revealed in any of the subsequent lawsuits. Sadly, although, yeah, can you imagine being the Wright brothers and be like, don't fucking mention ailerons. Don't fucking mention 1868. Sadly, although the Wright brothers were originally regarded as pioneering heroes, they would later be viewed in some circles as greedy patent trolls who played a big part in stunting the growth of the American aviation industry. I think they can be both. They can be aviation pioneers and patent troll dickheads. They are not mutually exclusive. Like, I make YouTube videos. I'm also a dickhead, as I've said before, you know, not mutually exclusive. I wouldn't describe myself as a pioneering YouTuber though. Although I feel like the whole reading off the script and shit is new and kind of shit. Oh! Things may have worked out very differently if someone else had secured the first patent for a flying machine. Maybe Oliver Crook should have been a bit more choosy about who is whacking in the mouth with a hockey stick. Obviously he was not choosy because he went on to murder like 16 people. Jesus Christ, whore. Bonus fact, the original 1903 Wright flyer ended up making its way to the moon, or at least a tiny part of it did. When Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon in 1969, he was carrying a tiny torn piece of muslin fabric from the left wing of the Wright flyer in his spacesuit pocket. The fabric was meant to represent the bond between the original Wright flyer. The stained bit of fabric may not look like much nowadays, but it still managed to sell for $4.57 million at auction in 2019. God damn, they didn't leave it on the moon? It's a shame Neil hadn't stuck a Big Mac in the other spacesuit pocket and kept it perfectly preserved for 50 years. That would have made proper big money, but This has been Business Blaze. Thank you so much for watching. It has been my pleasure to have you here with me as we blaze. This shirt, Keep Calm and Blaze On, is absolutely available in green. Blaze on, and I will see you next time.